If you only have a 401k, you're not getting the most for retirement.
Wait, what?
Add a Robinhood IRA on top, then they'll boost it by 3%.
You can do that?
And if you transfer in any retirement account, you get 3% on top of that.
Is there a limit to the match?
No limit. Robinhood Gold gets you the biggest contribution match of any IRA on the market. Sign up for Robinhood Gold at Robinhood.com/boost by April 30th. Subscription fees apply.
Investing involves risk. 3% match requires gold for 1 year from first match. Must keep IRA for 5 years. Match on transfers subject to additional terms and conditions. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC.
Welcome to the Dragon's Lair.
Hello and welcome to the Dragon's Lair podcast, your home all things Dragons RFC and rugby in the region. I'm Jamie, hope you are well. Joining me as always is my co-host, Gavin Thomas. How are we this week, Gav? We all good?
I'm very well, Jamie, very well. My rugby club beat our local rivals in a league game. We're unbeaten on top of the league, and I avoided having to go on the pitch, which is even better.
That's a great result then. Well done. You've done well there, didn't you, to go to that? Okay, so you can find us on platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, and the Sports Social Network. We're also available on YouTube as well if you prefer to watch us rather than listen to us. And if you like what we do, please rate us and leave us a good review, as it all helps us to grow the pod. And speaking of reviews, Gav, we've had a review come in on Apple Podcasts. This is from somebody called Pick Wrexham, and he says, "Fantastic to hear genuine fans discussing Dragons rugby. Thank you." Thank you as well for that review. He also suggests, now, do you remember this conversation we had about the Dragons running out to a song?
Yeah.
You remember that conversation? So
yes.
His suggestion, I think it's a good one. He's suggesting that the Dragons run out to Warning by Skindred. That's good, isn't it?
Well, Newport lads as well.
Yeah.
I listen to Nobody by Skindred. That's my kind of pre-match warm-up.
That's a good
game as well. I think Skindred bring a lot of thing. I saw them locally. They played in Bexhill. They were fantastic.
Yeah,
and
I saw Skindred live as well. I saw them in Cardiff supporting Volbeat, and they were good. They were so good.
Because I'm old, I can remember Benji's old band Dub War. I saw them supporting. I saw them supporting the Manics in the Astoria in Cardiff in '94, and it was such a small venue, and the crowd was heaving, and it was so hot, sweat was rising up, and it was coming off the mirrored ceiling and walls like rain.
When you saw Skindred, did you take your t-shirt off and do the Newport helicopter?
I did not, but there are some pictures of me, a middle-aged man, moshing, pushing over young people. It's
yeah. When I saw him in Cardiff, literally everyone just got a t-shirt out and started doing it. I thought, I'm not doing it. I'm not getting my belly and boobs out. No. So I will not be doing that. But it's great, isn't it, when everyone does that?
I had a county shirt on, but he didn't notice it, sadly.
Right, before we continue, I want to give a big shout out to everybody who has listened to our David Buttress Q&A episode. We had a huge response to this one. Lots of people getting in touch to say how much they enjoyed the pod. Lots of people sharing it on social media. It's by far our most listened to episode. So thank you to everybody who listened and shared it and sent us really good feedback. It was a good podcast, wasn't it? It was really enlightening. Yeah. It was great of David to give up his time, because we actually recorded it quite late at night, and we thought, well, if we can get like 20 minutes, half hour out of him, great. We ended up going on for like an hour and a half, didn't we? And we was all a bit tired come the end of it, but it was worth it. Really appreciate David giving up his time for us and to answer supporters' questions. So thanks to everyone who's listened, subscribed and sent us great feedback. We really do appreciate it. And later on in the episode tonight now, so we'll talk about the Saffa game later. We'll do the Gwent rugby roundup, and we'll give our thoughts on the Wales squad. That's quite an interesting squad, that, Gav, isn't it? We'll get stuck into that a bit later.
I'll try not.
But first, try not to think about it for now. First, we are going to have a look ahead to Sunday evening, a big game against the Sharks in Newport, not Llanelli, as South African Rugby magazine said in their online article this week. I mean, honest to God, people get paid for this. You know,
It's
I
all
just
it's
can't
all the
believe it.
same, no, isn't it? And you know, the
No,
distances
it's
in
not,
South
Gav. Newport is
Africa.
not Llanelli. Newport is not Llanelli. Let's make that abundantly clear now. It's not Llanelli. So a big fail for South Africa Rugby Magazine there. Anyway, to help us preview this big game, we have got sports analyst and Sharks rugby fan, Angus Usher. Angus, welcome to the pod. How are we?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. And I do know the difference between Newport and Llanelli because I've been to the Rodney Parade, so I do actually know the ground.
Oh, excellent, good man. So, what game did you go there for?
It was the Sharks Dragons game about 18 months ago. So it was a narrow win for the Sharks, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Will Rowland had an absolute stormer. He was unbelievable that game. For me, he was man of the match. I'm sure you're missing him dearly.
Oh, absolutely. We talk about it all the time, the loss of Will Rowlands. That was the game that we should have beat the Sharks that night. That was Angus O'Brien, the intercept try right near the end. Yeah, got in.
It was a very, very lucky win for the Sharks, and that started my love affair with Will Rowland. I've been a passionate supporter of his since that day, really. And to be fair, he was also amazing in that series of versus South Africa in 2022.
Yeah. Oh, he was. He's a class act, and we miss him dearly down here at Rodney Parade. Okay, so Angus, why don't you start off by telling our listeners just a bit about yourself and how you became a sports analyst?
Well, it's quite a recent change for me. I initially was working in the education industry. I was teaching and coaching sports, really, and I decided I wanted to do my master's in sports analysis in the UK because it's an opportunity that really didn't have in South Africa. You don't really have those specialized sports degrees in South Africa. The limit of sports degrees in South Africa at the moment, at least, is kind of human kinetic stuff. So I pursued a sports analysis master's. After completing that, during that, I worked at Ealing Trailfinders.
Okay.
For a year during their double win. So we won the cup and the league that season, and then from there I moved on to doing a very short stint of some ad hoc work with the Sharks, which is when I ended up at Rodney Parade, and then I have been at Chelsea ever since.
Oh, so you are allowed to say the name of the club, because I know on Jim Jeffries you didn't want to say the name of the club that you work
Especially
for. I do actually
Jim
follow Chelsea, so that's good. Ah, right, yeah. Chelsea are my Premier League club. I mean, I am a Newport County season ticket holder, but yeah, I don't understand how Chelsea can spend £1 billion though and still be struggling the way they are. I mean, that is a conundrum, isn't it? How can you spend all that money and still be bang average? But okay, that's
been a
good.
very disappointing season.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you were saying to me in the chat that we had before that you know Bradley Roberts quite well,
Absolutely,
don't you?
yeah.
So do you want to explain? You went to school with Bradley Roberts. That's great. What was he like in school then, Angus?
He was a very similar style rugby player. He wasn't, I wouldn't say he was a player that people were expecting to become an international. He actually, I mean, I'm sure you know his story. His story is quite amazing. He kind of fell out of the rugby scene entirely almost and was just playing amateur rugby, semi-pro rugby. And then that injury crisis at Ulster happened and he ended up getting into their squad, and then that ended up with him in kind of the Wales setup and then down to Union Dragons. So it's been a wonderful story for him. He was a good player at school. He was exactly the same type of player you'd expect, a strong ball carrier, good set piece. He wasn't much bigger than he is now. He's about the same size, really. He's not really changed at all. And he just had that attitude about him that he kind of wanted to stick playing rugby no matter what level of rugby he was playing. He just wants to continue with it straight after school. And he did that until he finally got a professional contract.
He is really tiny in the flesh, Bradley Roberts. I've met him in person a couple of times, and he is quite small. But I tell you what, that guy is hard as nails. You know, the tackles he makes on guys who are much bigger than him. He's not afraid. He doesn't shirk any challenge, Bradley. That's what I love about him. yeah, okay, he is small, but what he lacks in size, he's got really good strength, and yeah, he's a big of a fan favourite down here, Bradley Roberts. So good stuff. Okay, so I want to ask you about the big news in Welsh rugby this weekend, the bombshell that I'm still reeling from. I gotta be honest, I'm still shocked by this news. So Louis Rees-Zammit is going to quit rugby union with immediate effect to take up a career in the NFL. Rees-Zammit is joining the NFL's International Player Pathway Program with the aim of earning a place on the NFL roster this year. Like I said, I'm still shocked by this news. What did you make of it, Angus?
It seriously came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I was expecting to see him in the Welsh squad. I was expecting to see him kick on in the Six Nations, and I was thinking he was going to be the backbone of the kind of this young Welsh squad going forward. So huge news. And I've just seen about half an hour ago, the NFL officially tweeted their international picks, and they listed another rugby player as well, an English rugby player.
Henry Mallinder.
Henry
Mallinder, yeah, full back.
Kicker.
Yeah, which I could see. That's a natural thing. Mallinder was a good place kicker in rugby union. Louis Rees-Zammit is heading into a different kind of thing, isn't he? Because there are hundreds of college athletes with his level of athleticism who've played American football since they were kids. So it's a big challenge for Zammit.
Absolutely. And it's not a financially motivated decision either, it seems, because from everything I've read so far, he won't be earning anything near the amount of money he earns now unless he actually goes through the whole process and gets onto that roster.
Yeah. But then if he gets onto a roster, it will be, even if he's just a practice squad, he'll be earning more than he could have done in 5-6 years in rugby in a year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you follow NFL, Angus, at all? Do you follow it, the sport, or
not particularly? It's not my sport. I'm a traditional kind of British sport person. I watch cricket, rugby, and football really.
Oh, right. I was just wondering, do you think he can make that transition over from rugby to NFL? It's going to be very difficult. I mean, the obvious example was Christian Wade, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But this is a slightly different situation because Christian Wade wasn't in the England picture, was he? And he made his feelings quite clear that he wanted to pursue a career in the NFL. So it wasn't a shock or surprise, whereas this was a bolt out of the blue. Like you said, we expected him to be named in that Six Nations squad. All of a sudden, he's quit rugby altogether. And it is a big risk for him, isn't it? And I hope it works out for him. But I'm just wondering, I don't even know sort of what position he could play.
Well, he's on the roster.
Wide receiver.
He's on the roster as running back or wide receiver.
Yeah.
But people who know far more about American football than I do say he's the wrong body shape for a running back.
Yeah, he's not big enough.
He's too leggy. Yeah, kind of Jamie Roberts would have made a running back, I've been told. Yeah, by people who know what they're talking about. But I'm like Angus, really, kind of my interests are predominantly English sports.
It's a shame, though, isn't it? Because, Welsh rugby needs its star players, doesn't it? And I think it's a shame for Welsh rugby and the sport in general, because rugby doesn't have that many superstars compared to other sports. And to lose Louis Rees-Zammit, it is a shame, really. Like, on the one hand, good luck to him, but on the other hand, you can't,
I think it'll only be for a couple of. I think it'll be for a couple of years, and then he'll come back to the game. Because I don't think he'll make it, because he is not a freaking American sport. He might be physically a kind of a standout individual in rugby union, but there are college track and field athletes, American football athletes, basketball athletes, all of whom look like Louis Rees-Zammit. All of whom have grown up playing those sports.
Yeah. What do you think then, Angus? Do you think Louis Rees-Zammit will be back in rugby in a couple of years?
I suspect so as well. I don't know enough about American football to know how well he'll transfer. I've read the same thing that Gavin mentioned there about the kind of difference in his body shape and what you'd expect from a running back, etc. But it's a situation where I think odds are that he ends up back in rugby and he doesn't kind of make the jump.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of people say that he'll be back for the next World Cup for Wales, so we'll keep an eye on that one. And good luck to him. Like I said, on the one hand, I'm gutted because I do think Welsh rugby and the sport itself has lost a superstar. But on the other hand, it's a brave move, it's a bold move for him, and good luck to him. I'll be keeping an eye on him. Okay, I want to ask you about the other news this week, if I can, Angus. Nothing to do with the Sharks, but Elton Yantes. He's been given a 4-year ban from the sport for doping. And you would assume that'd be the end of his career now, given the fact that he's 33. I remember the Lions in the old Super Rugby when they reached those back-to-back finals, wasn't it? And he was on top of his game, wasn't he? I think from about 2017 to 2019, Elton Yantes was really, really good. What do you make of the news? Because I think it's all a bit sad that it's come to this,
To be honest, I think he always had quite a love-hate relationship with South African rugby supporters. So I don't think there'll be too much. There'll be too many tears shed over this kind of news by South African rugby and fans in general. But what is sad for me is that he's once again kind of bringing the South African name into disrepute in a way that he's taken this decision in France where it's a very similar story to Apiwe Dianti, who was trying to recover from injury, and he was trying to recover from injury, and again with the World Cup in mind, building up to a World Cup, he wanted to get into that squad, and he made a terrible decision. So it's almost like a mirror of the Apiwe Dianti. He was injured building up to the 2019 World Cup. He was trying to get fit and ready for the World Cup and trying to speed things up, and he seemed to make exactly the same decision. So it's really sad to see. That will be the end of his career, although he is still posting cryptic things on Instagram about how he's making a return or something. I don't know if he means he's returning to the gym, because I have no idea what on earth he could be talking about.
Yeah.
So Elton
he's 33 now.
Elton Yantes is denying, or is he saying that this is kind of an error rather than anything he's done? But there seems to be cases coming out in French rugby with Rhys Webb as well.
What's happening with that? Because that's gone very quiet, isn't it? That about Rhys Webb. Have you heard any more?
That happened both in the second division of French rugby as well.
Mm. Yeah,
Same time period, and I mean, it's strange that for me, I mean, this is not to try and back up South African rugby essentially, but 2 weeks within landing in South Africa, Elton Yantes tested positive. So if he was on it for that long in the French second division, why was he not tested, or how was he not picked up sooner?
I think the French second division is a bit like the Wild West. And it's again kind of just from the way it's refereed on the field to the way it's regulated off field as well.
I'd have to agree.
Yeah, like I said, he's 33 now, so you would assume that's the end of his career. And I know he's a bit of a divisive character, South African rugby, but I liked him. I did. I thought he was a decent fly half. I just think it's a shame it's come to this. It's all his own fault, of course, but yeah, well, it is, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
He's been in trouble a number of times, hasn't he? So
plenty of things.
Yeah. So I just think it's a bit of a shame. Okay, so I want to ask you now, Angus, if I can, about the URC. Okay, so we are in the 3rd year now of the URC, and I'd just like to get your perspective on it from a South African point of view. So how do you feel about the URC as a product, and what do you think the strengths and weaknesses are of this league?
I guess, and considering I know your viewership will obviously be probably 95% Welsh, so it'll be a very different viewpoint on it. But from my perspective, I've never really known anything different than a cross-continental competition.
Yeah.
Since I was born, it's been part and parcel of South African rugby. We were part of my upbringing was waking up early in the morning and watching Sharks play against the Crusaders and the Sharks play against Waratahs. That was part of my childhood, and therefore the argument I see often is about kind of Welsh and other kind of British fans saying that they don't like the fact that there's this inability to have proper away fans. But that's never been something that has kind of been part of my everyday rugby experience, because it's not really something that we have in South Africa. It's not an experience that we really worry about. So it's away fans is very low down on the priority list for us. So from a perspective of that side of things, it's not really been any different. And I actually preferred the URC to Super Rugby. I know that's quite a surprise for a lot of people, but I've really preferred it. I prefer the fact that I'm actually a bit closer to things now, because obviously I live in London, so I'm able to see games more often as well, in the UK as well as when I'm back in South Africa. But I prefer the dynamic. I prefer the kind of equality, essentially, in the way of it seems to be a little bit more even. You don't have all the New Zealand teams dominating everything year in year out. It just seems a little less predictable. And ironically, this is a strange one, because I don't think almost anyone on earth would agree with me, but I actually prefer it to the Challenge and Champions Cup. I don't enjoy the Champions Cup as much as everyone else seems to. I quite like actually the URC and its consistency. I get a bit frustrated with the Challenge Cup popping up for 2-game fixtures and then disappearing for another several weeks and things. I like the week in, week out URC.
That's interesting, Alice.
And
Really
Angus, so I've got, this is my opinion. There's been no suggestion this would be the case. Now, lots of Welsh fans want an Anglo-Welsh league, and I think that's not happening for a million reasons, which I've said before. One, do you think, though, there would be interest from English clubs in having South African teams in their competition? Now, I'm thinking of yourself and the South African kind of diaspora that live in London. I lived in London for many years, worked with and played rugby with lots of South African guys. There's a market in England, isn't there, for South African rugby?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was at the South Africa versus New Zealand game at Twickenham, the warm-up game in the build-up to the World Cup. And there must have been about 30 plus thousand South Africans there. And that just shows you a small portion of the appetite for that game, because it was a sellout. I mean, there would have been people who wanted to go, they couldn't. There's an absolutely there's an appetite for it, and in particular, as you say, in London and in the kind of outskirts of the area. So considering a lot of English rugby, although I know they don't like it, a lot of English rugby is based around that kind of southern part of England. That's a huge market. I mean, apart from maybe games up in Newcastle and things, you would be able to get a lot of South Africans to watch their former, I guess you would say, former clubs that they supported when they lived in South Africa.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you. Sorry, Gav, go on.
No, I was just going to say, kind of, there will be a change in the leagues, but you kind of and lots of people who are anti the idea of South African teams being involved, saying, well, it's expensive for English clubs, but I think it will bolster crowds. We saw that the kind of Ospreys were very sensible in choosing that Sharks game as being the one they played in London, because there are people from South Africa in the tens or hundreds of thousands living in London and surrounding areas. Yeah. So there's that, but there's also the TV revenue, because ultimately that's what funds sports teams and funds leagues. It's not people paying to come through the door. In soccer, it's the money they get from Sky that funds them. Clearly helps if people turn up and watch you. But teams like Bournemouth with crowds of 15,000 still survive because they get hundreds of millions from Sky.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a huge appetite for rugby in South Africa. Of course, you'd be aware of that. We have 3 dedicated rugby channels on showing rugby all the time. There's always rugby on. There's schoolboy rugby. I mean, we have a dedicated channel for schoolboy rugby 24/7. It's
that's great.
There's a huge appetite for it. So although the rand is weak, and should that change in the future, the dynamic could change entirely. But on the basis of viewership itself, there's a huge appetite for it. And if there were to be a shift in the future and the currency becomes stronger, South Africa would become a serious power in the kind of viewership market, because they would be pumping in more money than most.
Yeah. Because one of the questions I was going to ask you, actually, you've already answered it, but I was going to ask you, is there any part of you that misses the old Super Rugby when you come up against, the Crusaders, the Highlanders, and don't you miss any of that, or you're fully bought into the URC now?
Of course, I do miss it, and I miss the New Zealand teams probably more than the Australian teams.
Yeah.
And there were some great rivalries, and I mean, in particular, the Sharks had a really. It wasn't a particularly noticeable rivalry in the way that there was any specific talk about it, but the Sharks versus the Blues always seemed to be a really big game. It always seemed to. I mean, I remember over the years the Sharks won quite a few times in Auckland. The Blues had some crackers against the Sharks. It became its own mini rivalry. So I do miss that, and as I said, I miss the mornings. I miss being able to watch rugby on a Saturday morning, first thing when you kind of wake up. It's quite a special thing. It keeps you busy all day.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote on social media once that I think Super Rugby now as a product is far weaker without the South African teams. Before you left, I generally think it is. And I had a load of shit from it from New Zealand, Kiwis, and that. But I stand by that. I do think the current Super Rugby format now, for me, it's great. You got Monaco, Pacific, and in it, and all that. That's great. You got the Fiji and Samoan teams there, but I do think it misses South Africa. I have to be honest. I don't think the product is as good, but it does seem like South Africans have really bought into the URC now as well, because we're seeing, especially at the Stormers, there's the crowds are going up, isn't it? So you think now there is an appetite in South Africa? Is everyone buying into it back home in South Africa, do you think?
I mean, the crowd change in South Africa has been influenced very much over the years by political and other reasons. I mean, there's been a lot of people leaving the country. There's been a lot of immigration and everything. So the dynamic in the country has changed. I mean, I remember 2005, 2006, that era, Currie Cup games. I remember seeing like sellout crowds in Currie Cup games, and sellout in South African stadium terms, so 60 odd thousand. It's something you would never see nowadays. The rugby landscape has changed. Obviously, TV and everything has made that played a big role. There's a huge community of South Africans living abroad now, so that's obviously played a role too. But I believe that if you were to revert back to Super Rugby tomorrow, the crowds would be smaller than they are right now.
Really?
I think people have really bought into the culture. Maybe your Crusaders type of game would probably draw in the most, because Crusaders obviously just have that pull power, especially in the Western Cape, where there's a lot of kind of communities that actually supported the Crusaders from South Africa. But for the most part, I think those games that we're seeing now in the URC have become their own kind of draws. People really want to see the sort of like Ulster Stormers game or Leinster coming in. People really are looking forward to those matches and are going out to see them.
What kind of crowds do the Currie Cup get in South Africa now? Because I can remember, I'm considerably older than you guys, and I could remember reading in my rugby magazines as a child, kind of where there'd be 70,000 people standing room only at Currie Cup games, and they always seemed very romantic to me. And this was at the time when South Africa weren't really involved in World Rugby, so it felt even more exotic, because it wasn't something we ever saw really footage of. So seeing these pictures, it seemed really kind of, just otherworldly almost, and it looked quite glamorous compared to watching games in Ebbw Vale as a child. But what's the Currie Cup doing now, Angus? Are there still people going to watch those teams?
Oh, the crowds are very small. I would say a lot of your big schoolboy matches in South Africa are bringing in bigger crowds than Currie Cup games. It's a mixture of things. It's the fact that it's been run alongside the URC recently, because now there's no break in our season essentially. So without the break in the season, especially last season, they ran it at the same time as the URC, which was a terrible decision because it's impossible to bring crowds in when they know that the second, third choice team is being played. And obviously a huge pull factor is kind of the Sharks having their Springboks back or whatever it might be. So it is really poor at the moment. I think their decision for this year is to be playing it in the off season, but then that's obviously going to have kind of issues when it comes to how they're going to rest players, because a big problem in South African rugby, and if you've seen anything I say on Twitter about it, is I'm very kind of outspoken about the fact that a lot of these South African Springbok players in particular are not getting an off season. They don't have an off season because the second the URC finishes, they go straight into their Springbok season, and they do that until November, and then they get pulled straight back into their club season. And the only time they really get off is a handful of weeks thrown in small bits at a time at them over the course of the year, and it's not really a way to let your body rest.
I don't think there's an off season in rugby anymore, and the way they're conditioned and the way the game is played, which is why we're seeing far more serious injuries far more regularly, because the calendar is insane, and then to throw in more competitions, to throw in the World League, and I don't see how players can maintain that, and you can almost see why Louis Rees-Zammit would look to a sport where he'll play 18 games in a season.
Yeah.
As opposed to a sport where he'll play 60 games in a season.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Well, let's stay on the Currie Cup then for a minute, because I want to get your thoughts on this, Angus. What do you think about the Currie Cup's standard? Because a lot of Welsh teams now are looking at Currie Cup players to recruit. Now, we've seen Cardiff, they've seen Tinas de Beer. Now, we didn't know a thing about him over in Wales. So who the hell is this guy when they signed him? Do you know why? He's turned out to be a pretty good player for Cardiff. And I know that Scarlets have signed Edwin Swart, and they're also looking to sign Van der Merwe from the Cheetahs. We've seen the Ospreys link up with the Cheetahs, and they came over here for a couple of games. Do you think they're able to make that jump up from Currie Cup to URC?
There's some quality players there, in particular, and as you kind of mentioned, those players that you've mentioned have come from two unions in particular, is the Cheetahs and the Pumas. And I guess the reason those two teams are probably standing out is because their Currie Cup teams really were their full strength sides, while the rest of the teams were playing B or C teams. But there's some seriously quality players that were on show in the last Currie Cup. I mean, as you mentioned there, Tinas de Beer was playing for the Pumas alongside Devon Williams, who now is playing fullback for the Bulls on loan. And he had a fantastic game last weekend. He was unbelievable in that game against Bristol. So Devon Williams was at fullback for them. They had a good forwards pack. They've got some quality backline players in general, actually. And they, in two Currie Cups, they won the one 2 years ago, and they got to the final this year. So it shows that the quality is there in those kind of smaller sides. They're not really getting the opportunities anymore in South African rugby because, as I've mentioned, the Currie Cup's really become the kind of side hustle for South African rugby. They're not really focusing on it at all. And actually, to be fair, your question about crowds, those two teams were probably drawing the best crowds. So it was the Cheetahs and the Pumas. And I guess that would obviously make total sense because those people in those areas are getting to see their first choice players.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but Dragons signed Dion Slabbert from the Pumas, the lock. It was all done, signed and sealed, but unfortunately he had to cancel the contract because his mother was very ill. So he had to stay in South Africa. So we could have had a Currie Cup player join us at Ronnie Parade. But I think that's the kind of, player that we lack. We need a bit of South African steel in our pack, and it's a bit of a shame what happened there. But I do think Welsh teams are going to be looking more at Currie Cup players because I don't know if you realise the budget situation in Wales. So we're operating on player budgets of 5.2 at the moment, which is pretty small. Next season, that's going to be cut to 4.5. So we can't go out and sign the likes of Steinman and, with these world-class World Cup spring. It can't happen. So for the Welsh teams, I think we're going to be looking far more. Well, I've been told actually we are going to be looking far more Currie Cup players, which is why I was keen to get your view on the standard of the players. So yeah, we'll have to keep an eye out for that. I'm sure Dragons will be looking in South Africa Currie Cup as well to try and bring some South African steel in our pack, because God knows we need it. Okay, let's talk Sharks. Well, to give the correct name, Hollywood Bets Sharks. I'm not going to lie, Angus, the Sharks, it is an awful name, yeah. The Sharks confuse me. I do not understand the Sharks because there's so much talent in that squad. You've got a core of World Cup winners, and yet they rock bottom the URC. You've won just one game, which of course was against the Dragons, wasn't it? It had to be against us. You absolutely hammered us that day, 69 points to 14. Yeah, a painful day. Why do you think, though, the Sharks have struggled so much, given all the talent you've got in your squad? You've got a good coach there in John Plumtree. What's going wrong in Durban, do you think?
I mean, as you say, there's a lot of talent there, but I think it's talent in the wrong positions, and it's injuries in the wrong positions as well. I mean, you think losing someone like Thomas du Toit to Bath is a huge loss, and a quality player from every aspect of the game. I mean, he really is a proper all-rounder as a tight head prop, and losing him and then his replacement being injured is a disaster. And even then, now the replacement in Cooney Oosterhuizen is also injured. So you've got Vincent Koch, a world-class tight head prop, injured. And then Vincent Koch injury is made worse by the fact that Oosterhuizen's injured too. So it's a huge blow for the Sharks, having kind of no rocket tight head, and having to blood youngsters there and try and get that to work. But in general, the positions they have that are working at the moment, you've got sort of your luxury positions are where you've got your Springboks, if you know what I mean. I mean, you've got Lukhanyo Am at 13, who's a great player, but you need him to be in a team that's on the front foot, getting a lot of kind of front foot gain line, and he's getting into positions where he can do the magical things he does. Someone like Makozola Mapimpi as well, he's an expert finisher, but what's the point of having an expert finisher if the ball never gets to him, or if you're never giving him those opportunities?
We know that problem at the Dragons, don't worry about that. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
And then, yeah, you think about like a prop like Oxen Chair, when you have a superb loose head attacking loose head scrummager, it becomes a lot less useful when you don't have a tight head who's able to hold his side of the scrum. He can't really to be an aggressive loose head. You have to have a solid base before you can properly attack, and there's no point in him attacking a scrum if we're going to just wheel it around. So it's just really timely injuries. I mean, as good as Lukhanyo Am is, as good as Mapimpi is, as good as Oxen Chair or even Etzebeth is, you could configure the injuries if you had the choice and can configure the injuries that this Sharks team has had, and pick who got injured and who didn't. You would know that the first two players you would choose to keep fit would have been Bongi and Mbonambi and Vincent Koch over anyone else. Because if you had that solid front row in Chair, Mbonambi and Vincent Koch, the rest of the team could have been playing poorly, but you're never going to go backwards in a scrum. You're going to have that dominance. You're going to have penalties. You're going to be putting it into the corner. And the results would come just purely from having that dominance.
I always say I am a second row, so I would say this, but rugby games are won by the tight five anyway. You know, it's and tight head for me it's the pivotal position, because if you've got a tight head who's holding the scrum, everything else happens. And like you see, Vincent Koch is probably the best tight head in the world, but if he's not there, then you have got a problem.
Yeah, and he's not even put on a Sharks shirt yet. Well, not in anger, at least. He's done it for a photo shoot, I believe, but that's about it. So he's back for the Stormers game in 3 weeks' time, but it's too little too late for the Sharks now. I think the plan is very much to be putting all their their chips into the cup now, because I think they're very aware that even finishing 8th place in the URC would be tough.
So I was going to ask you that question. So are we likely to see lots of World Cup winners in Newport on Sunday?
No, because I guess most of the World Cup winners are either injured, or I believe I was told today that one of the box who's not been injured recently, so this is probably likely Irvin Etzebeth or Grant Williams. One of them is going to miss out this weekend because of a family issue, so they're staying back in South Africa. So I believe there might be no Irvin Etzebeth or Grant Williams, which would mean Jaden Hendrickse will definitely start at 9, obviously a quality 9 anyway, but they'll make a difference in the scrum if Irvin Etzebeth is not around.
Yeah, I think I'd prefer not to see Irvin Etzebeth in
Oh,
the
yeah.
Sharks team.
So
I'm not going to lie about that. Whatever issues are going on there, fair enough. But yeah, I am slightly concerned about this weekend. Because on the one hand, I think it'd be great to see all these, World Cup winners in Newport. It's on my doorstep. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, no, because we need to win this game. But look, I don't think it makes a difference what team Sharks put. I think it's going to be very difficult for the Dragons. So just to confirm then, the Dragons need a win to guarantee their place in the last 16. And the Sharks only need a point to go through to the last 16. So, yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you how Sharks are going to approach this game, but then Gavin got it first and asked about So do you think they'll go as strong as they possibly can then for this game, Angus? Or do you think they'll sort of rotate a little bit?
I think for the squad available, they'll play the absolute strongest squad they have available.
Okay.
That isn't exactly the strongest team right now, but they won't be holding any punches, is what I'm saying. There's no chance we'll see someone being rested for the sake of rest alone. It'll only be because of injuries or knocks, or even if someone's traveled but then suddenly takes a knock in training. They'll be the only reason we don't see a full strength side.
Okay. Not the news I wanted to hear. I'm not going to lie. I was hoping they'd rotate a little bit.
I was hoping for the team they played against, the Ospreys.
Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which seemed to be made up of, kind of their... well, yeah, I think that wasn't a really representative Sharks team at all, was it? The team that played in London against the Ospreys. Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite a rotated side. I think the main difference between that time of the season and now is the Sharks have 3 weeks till the next game, so they've got to rest anyway. Plus, this is the only game really, or the only competition really, where the Sharks still have a chance of going far in the competition. So I think it's all hands on deck now. 3 weeks time, they'll probably send a full strength team to play against the Stormers, and then they may start rotating and playing a few mixed or second teams in the URC as they go through the rest of the URC, because as I said, I don't think they're going to be making the top 8, especially if they lose to the Stormers in 3 weeks' time.
Do you think they can go all the way then, Angus, in this competition? Do you think the Sharks can sort of put their URC form to one side and give this competition a really good crack?
I really actually do. I'm not, and that's not me trying to be a diehard Sharks fan at all. I think logically it would make sense to see that happen, because the injuries are coming back at the right time. Plus, the injuries are coming at a time where they won't be forced into playing 80 minutes in the URC, because likely the URC games will be training runs. So we could see Mbonambi and Vincent Koch, etc., playing 40 minutes, getting their fitness back, getting back into form. And we could all see this coming together perfectly by the time the round of 16 comes along, where the Sharks at this rate have a home round of 16 really. So so from then on, it's just, if the Sharks come away with a win this weekend, they would have a home round of 16 and quarterfinal. And 2 home games in a row like that in the cup could be a considerable advantage. Obviously, they can't host from the semifinals onwards, and that's where things could get a bit hazy. But I can very much see the Sharks getting to the semifinals.
Yeah, okay. So what's your prediction then for this weekend? What were you going for? Well, it's obviously going to say Sharks. Okay, Sharks by how many? That's the question I need to ask. Is that?
I think it'll be really tight. Honestly, I think it's very similar to the game I watched last at the Rodney Parade. I really think it'll be a close match. I think if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would probably guess that this would have been a Dragons win. And the Dragons games recently have been tight as well. I mean, you've narrowly lost your last 2 games.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those where I believe it'll be a penalty score to decide it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be tight. This is not going to be a repeat of what we saw in Durban, where we got absolutely hammered. It won't be that, because Dragons are playing at home. They got a much stronger squad who are heavily depleted by injuries. Then this would be a different contest. And there's a weather warning out for wind as well. There's going to be strong wind, so the weather is going to play.
I'm quite literally looking for the weather right now as well, because that'll make a big difference as well.
It will.
But that loss to Zebre was tough as well, because I thought you guys were really in it, and you got that win against Scarlets at the end as well. So there's a few very tight games that you've had recently, and I think we'll be in for another one, especially with the injuries that the Sharks have in that forwards pack. I think that will really give the Dragons an edge at scrum time, and I think it'll be quite an even contest in the gain line as well.
You haven't seen our scrummage this season a lot, Angus. I would suggest if you think we're ever going to have the edge of scrum time.
I would be very surprised if we did.
It's been a bone of contention.
No, but I mean, I think more what I'm referring to is if you had your Bongi and Banambi, Vincent Koch, even if they're starting, I don't think the Sharks would walk away with less than 4 or 5 scrum pens. So,
or even more than that, I would imagine.
That's being kind.
Yeah. But okay, you know, that is probably the best front row in the world when it's, well, not probably, it is the best front row in the world when it's there, isn't it? You know, there's no question in that.
I think tight 5 wise, you struggle to find a stronger tight 5. Then, I mean, it's a tight 4 and one other. I mean, it's Eben Etzebeth, Vincent Koch, Bongi Wanambi, Oxenchair, and throw whoever, put a fly half at the other lock position. It's not really going to make a difference.
They've won two World Cups, haven't they? You know, it's those men. You know, it's you're not going to come up against a better tight 5s than that.
But they're bottom
of the URC.
And that's what puzzles me. I can't believe a squad that good is bottom of the URC.
Well,
it's just
but like as Angus has said, I don't think that squad has played a great deal, has it?
Well, no, they haven't. That combination's not played at all yet. That they've never played.
Okay,
Bongi and Wanambi's not played a single game this season. Vincent Koch's not played a single game this season. So we're yet to see that front row at all.
Okay, Gav, what's your prediction for this weekend then?
Sharks by 10.
I said Dragons by 4. I did. Out of optimism, out of blind optimism, I said Dragons by 4 on the VAT podcast.
The Welsh squad has strangled all optimism out of me now, and I am now a mask of positivity. And,
keep your powder dry. We'll come on to the Wales squad later. Let's just focus on this weekend. So you're saying Sharks by 10, yeah?
Yeah, you know, I don't think they'll be rampaging, but they have got players who can change a game. And as Angus said, you know, Mapimpi, they haven't done a lot, but you know, I think they are better than what we have in those positions. And he says, you know, former World Player of the Year, clearly is. But I just think that they have got game changers that we do not have.
Yeah, absolutely. John Plumtree is not going to be available for this game, is he, Angus? So I understand he's in New Zealand with family commitments. Who's going to be leading the Sharks then? Who will be head coach that day when they come down?
It'll be the attack coach, David Williams. So he was actually previously the Sharks attack coach when they had a blinding season at the beginning, just before COVID struck in 2020, and they were they were leading the Super Rugby, and they were having an incredible season. It was some of the best Sharks rugby I've ever seen in my life. And he was the attack coach back then. And then post-COVID, he left to Bath, I believe. He had a very short stint at Bath. Then he went to Zebra, and now he's back at the Sharks again. And slowly, I think he's slowly getting his ideas back into the Sharks team about how he wants to attack. But yes, he'll take the reins. And then I believe Neil will step up as well.
Good. Okay, thank you very much for that. So before you go, you've been a great guest, by the way. Before you go, I just want to get a couple of predictions from you. So if a South African team is going to win the URC, who's it going to be? Who's most likely to win out of the South African teams?
I think it'll be the Blue Bulls. I think the Blue Bulls, although they have a knack of losing to the Stormers, I think they are incredibly well placed at the moment. I still don't think people realize how difficult it is to play at Loftus. It's the Stormers have they're in a good mental place right now when they play at home, but there's not a great advantage to playing in Cape Town from a like a physical perspective. It's at sea altitude. The weather's not exactly too controversial. It's not very different to kind of a regular summer's day in the UK. It's a pretty normal standard place to play. The Stormers just have a good mentality there. The Sharks have the advantage of humidity and the ball being like a bar of soap when you play in Durban. So that's almost an advantage that the Sharks have. And then the Bulls have Loftus, or Fortress Loftus, as people call it. And it is a scary place to play. The altitude, the kicking game that they have, it benefits from the altitude as well. The physicality that they bring, they're just it's so well placed at the moment. I mean, I was talking about it recently. Their loose trio depth that they have two quality loose trios that are proper quality. Cameron Honeycomb has had an incredible season. And
Welshman? He's Welsh.
Just
saying, he's Welsh.
And his season's been going incredibly well. And then he takes a step back for 2 matches and they play Gumedi instead. And Gumedi's been playing incredibly well too. And then you've got Marcel Coetzee, Marco van Staden, Ulrich Lowe, Nazim Carr. I literally listed on Twitter, it was 10 loose forwards that are recognized loose forwards. That's before you even go into their locks where they've got Norkier and Vermaak, who've been injured for a lot of the season, and they've been playing 2 21-year-olds who are also fantastic. So the depth they have in that forwards pack alone, their backline, they've got Moody and Kirtley and Willie Leroux. I think they're really well placed. I think writing them off now, I know a lot of Stormers fans are saying that the Stormers will never lose to the Bulls again because it's now 7 games in a row. But I'm quite confident that the Bulls will go far, especially if they don't come across the Stormers again. I'm very confident the Bulls will go far.
For me, it's Bulls or Leinster who are the likely winners of the URC. It's always Leinster,
but the Bulls never lose at home, do they? They are incredible at home.
I imagine, though, like Angus said, kind of playing at Loftus is just something else. It's the altitude and the atmosphere.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
that Bulls team, if you are a slightly weaker team in the URC, if you go there and you give a 5 out of 10 performance and the Bulls are playing their strongest team, I can see them putting 80 points on the team this season very comfortably.
I'm glad the Dragons are not going back to South Africa and playing the Bulls, quite frankly, because that would be absolutely terrifying. Okay, one other prediction before you go. I want to know who you think is going to win the Six Nations, which starts next month. Who's winning it? Who's getting the wooden spoon? If you think Wales are going to get a wooden spoon, be completely honest, Angus. We're perfectly fine with that. So winners and wooden spoons. Who's getting them?
That's a great question. I think winners is a lot easier than wooden spoon for me. Winners, I think, I mean, it's probably a very common pick at the moment, but it'll be between Ireland or France, and I think it'll be France actually.
Yeah.
I know everyone's going to say they're missing Dupont, but I think they'll take it. I think they'll take this the Six Nations. They've also got the more favourable fixtures for this year, because obviously, as you are very well aware, you have 1 year where your fixtures are slightly more favourable and another where they're not.
Yeah.
So this is their favourable year. I think they'll win it. Wooden spoon. I wouldn't even say Wales. Honestly, I think Gatland's got a plan, and we saw the kind of beginnings of that at the World Cup, and it was a bit too early for it at the World Cup. I think as good as Italy have been recently, it might be Italy again. I'm not sure what to expect from Scotland. We're probably going to have the usual Scottish performance of them beating England and then losing to Wales or whatever way they do it around. But it's going to be a really interesting one. I really do think it's going to be a battle of the bottom four rather than a battle of the top two, if that makes sense. I think that's where the side of it's going to lie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you rate Warren Gatland as a coach, Angus? Because in Wales, he can be quite divisive. There are some people saying he hasn't achieved enough with Wales, which is mad considering about the championships and Grand Slams. He does seem to get a mixed reaction. We saw what happened with the Lions and his stint with the Chiefs, which was really strange, wasn't it? That stint with the Chiefs, he didn't win a game, did he? Or he won one game. He was very bizarre. But what do you think of him as a coach? Do you rate him?
I think he suits exactly what Wales are. I think he suits exactly what Wales are because. And please tell me if if you think I'm completely wrong here, but I think Wales and South Africa are very similar as rugby nations.
I agree. A lot of people said that. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
No, I agree.
I think it's all about the passion and the heart for South Africa and Wales. It's all physicality. It's hard work rate. It's all of those kind of attributes. It's all about being like a gritty team, not being a flashy team. And that's what Gatland's all about. That's really his bread and butter. He wants the hardest working team there. He wants the fittest team. He wants you to be structured and follow a game plan and just be completely dedicated to exactly what he says. And to try and do that at the Chiefs in a Super Rugby season, you're not gonna get that buy-in. You're not gonna get people wanting to kind of play to such a stringent game plan. New Zealand kind of club sides aren't really that way inclined in the first place. And then British and Irish Lions, I feel like people say he was successful for British and Irish Lions. I don't believe his British and Irish Lions tenures as a success because although they got that result in New Zealand, I believe he's not that type of manager, coach in the way I always say manager when it's British and Irish Lions, because it almost feels like a completely different environment where you've got a bigger role in the decision making rather than the actual coaching itself. But I believe in the British and Irish Lions setup, it's not something where he has enough time to get the buy-in and the kind of the structures in place that he would want to do. If the British and Irish Lions was a 2-year gig, it would be a different story where he could really kind of build the culture that he does at Wales. But what he's done for Wales is nothing but incredible. He clearly has such a distinct picture in his mind of what he expects from his team and everything. And obviously that doesn't suit everyone, but it suits Wales. I think if you put him in a different country, a different setup, it wouldn't work at all. But where he is, I think he's perfectly suited to getting results with Wales.
Yeah, brilliant. I agree. Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Angus. Before you leave us, Angus, would you like to say, it's been great, isn't it? Before you leave us, do you want to tell people where they can find you on X, formerly known as Twitter, if they want to follow your work? And I do suggest people follow him because he's a really good follow. Where can people find you?
Thank you. I mean, to be honest, I mostly post URC stuff. So if someone's a Premiership Rugby fan or something, I might not be catering to them. But I only really use X, and I go by at analyst Gus, so relatively easy to find. And yeah, I just try and post some stats and insights from Oval Insights quite often, and do that on my free time and weekends and things. So that's what I try and put out there. And I'll be posting some more relatively soon, so we'll get to see the landscape of of the URC so far this season.
Excellent. We look forward to that. I would say good luck for the rest of the season, the Sharks, but they are keeping Dragons off the bottom of the table. So I'm not being funny. If they could continue this poor form, that keeps us off the bottom. So we would appreciate if this poor form can continue. So we'll end up finishing bottom at some stage, I expect. But no, brilliant. You've been a great guest. Thank you so much again for joining us, Angus. Really appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. You take care now. Bye.
Take care.
There we go then. That was Angus. He was a nice guy, Gav, wasn't he?
Yeah, very knowledgeable as well. And, you know, working with Chelsea, I imagine that's a very different situation to the URC.
Yeah, I was surprised he said the name of the club, because when he was on the Jim Jeffries podcast, it was a fair play, a really good gig for him, big name. And they asked him about the club he was working for, and he wouldn't say. But then I was surprised he told us on this pod. It's great.
We've probably got slightly less listeners than Jim Jeffries, to be honest.
Well, slightly, yes, yeah, just slightly.
At the moment, you know, it's
at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm confident in saying we're certainly the biggest Dragons podcast out there.
We're the only Dragons podcast, Gavin Fitness. We are the world's only dedicated Dragons RC podcast.
So therefore, the biggest.
Absolutely. Yeah, so thanks again to Angus for joining us. He's worth a follow on X if you want to see his work. He's pretty good and very knowledgeable. So yeah, we get all the good guests on this podcast, guys. We've been very fortunate. We get some bloody good guests. Right, shall we start off the second part of the pod with some contract news? Rio, that's right. Dragons have announced this week that Rio Dyer has signed a new deal to stay at Ronley Parade. The 24-year-old from Rogerstone has agreed what is being described by the Dragons as a multi-year deal. Chris Curran said in the Argus is 2 years.
Well, it's multi-year.
Yeah, that's right. It's a 2-year deal. Because some people will say, well, how many years is that? You know, from people Queen was it 2, 3, or 4? But it is a 2-year deal according to Chris Curran. Dyer was reported to have been on the radar of clubs in England and France, although the Dragons were always confident of keeping the speedster. And I guess because he's under that cap threshold of 25, I guess it was always likely he was going to stay. Not guaranteed, but it was always likely. And I'm absolutely delighted he's staying. So it's good news, Scav, isn't it?
It is. And, you know, I think it was interesting that when David Buttress was on, he was talking about, you know, he didn't allude to the fact there was some that wouldn't be staying, but, you know, he was saying that David Flanagan has, you know, kind of a model for what he wants. And, you know, I think Rio and Aaron Wainwright are very much in that. As for the other internationals, I'm less sure.
Just to pick up on what you said, David Flanagan, a couple of people said to me, why is he calling David Flanagan? It did take some getting used to, mine. When he said it a couple of times, David Flanagan?
It threw me a bit.
He's Dave Flan, isn't he? We all know him as Dave Flanagan or Dave Flan. When he started saying David, I'm like, who the fuck is David? And now I realise it's David Flanagan. It doesn't sound right, though, does it? No. He's Dave Flanagan, isn't he? We know him as Dave Flanagan.
Yeah, I'm valid. I was doing well not to call David Buttress Die Buttress. Like, you know, it's.
Yeah.
I know a guy called Dave Davis who's called Double Die.
Oh gosh! Right, I was just going to say I liked what Rio said. His comments in the Argus. He said, "We are confident we can turn the stigma around and start getting more wins and putting in better performances, not only for ourselves but also for our fans who come to watch and support us throughout." Those are wise words, aren't they? You know, from a young man. I liked what he said about turning, you know, the stigma around, because there is a stigma around the Dragons. It's, you know, we can't shy away from it. And fair play for him to come out with that. I thought that was well said.
But, you know, he's a proper Newport boy, isn't he? And his mum and his sister are fans, and, you know, it's a whole thing, isn't it? Like, you know, he's Dragons through and through.
Yeah, he certainly is. In other news then, Dave Flanagan says he's confident that the Dragons can keep hold of Leon Brown, Wainwright, Tane Basham. All of them are out of contract this summer. So Dave Flanagan said today they are Gwent boys and I'm sure they want to stay. It's on us to make sure that the offers are fair and to help them stay. They all have different ambitions in life. There is competition in certain places around the squad, but fundamentally, they are good players that we want to keep. Now, we questioned David Buttress on this, and he wouldn't be drawn onto it, which is fair because there's negotiations going on. But how likely is it, Gav, they're going to keep all those guys? Because I think there's a danger of at least one or two of them leaving.
I think we'll lose at least one, and possibly two. And I'm saying this out loud now. I'd be all right if we... Leon Brown is fine, but, you know, he doesn't do the one thing I expect from a tight end, which is scrummage. And Tane Basham is either world-beating or an absolute plum. And I don't think he's consistent enough.
He's had a disappointing season so far, Tane, isn't he? And I'm a huge fan of Tane Basham, but I don't want to lose him. I do not want to lose Tane. He has been heavily linked to the Scarlets. And there's some bloke on the Scarlets Fever forum, not to be confused with the Scarlets Fever podcast, as Lee pointed out on Rap this week. He wants to make that distinction very clear. He's absolutely adamant, this bloke, on Scarlets forum, that he's been down to Parker Scarlets, he's signed, he's agreed terms and all this. I don't think that's quite the case.
No.
But I have heard the Scarlets are sniffing.
He's from Pontypool. Like I imagine he would find Llanelli an entirely separate country. he probably thinks he need a passport to cross a locker. He's such a Pontypool lad. So well, he's Talawain, isn't he? Tane, yeah.
Talawain, yeah. Yeah. I think we're going to lose Leon.
Yeah. So
and as I've said before, I've always liked Leon, but is he value for money when the budgets are being cut? And, you know, the scrummaging aside, we all know how good he is in the loose. And yes, his scrummaging is a work in progress. The biggest thing for me is we just don't see enough of him.
No.
That's the biggest problem. And when he does return fit, and we've seen it again this season, he misses huge chunks. He comes back, he plays a game, and then he's off to Wales again.
Yeah.
And we've got to pay his full wages now. The way that the payment structure has changed in Wales. So we're no longer getting Welsh Rugby Union paying 80% of a player's wages, and Dragons only paying 20%. We got to pay the full amount now, and we really got to weigh up, is it worth paying these Welsh internationals full whack when we barely see them? But, I mean, we've got to keep the likes of Aaron Wainwright at the club. I would like to see Tane side. I'm delighted Rio's staying. You know, I've always been a fan of his. I think he's great, and he's got a big future ahead of him. But there's going to have to be some tough decisions. And also, as well, I was reading in the Argus today that C.O. Tompkinson, Gonzalo Birchnew and Max Clark are likely to leave the Dragons, and that's to free up some budget. So we can expect those guys to be leaving us. But yeah, tough decisions ahead, Gav, isn't it?
There is, you know, and not just for us, for all the clubs. You know, it's
yeah,
you know,
yeah. But in an ideal world, we want to keep the likes of Leon and Tane. But unfortunately, I think for us and supporters are going to have to accept that maybe one or two are going to have to leave.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, then. I don't want to dwell on this result too much, but we'll quickly move on to Saffa Dragons because I want to talk about the Wales squad in a bit of depth. So Dragons wasted an opportunity to seal a place in the last 16 of the Challenge Cup as they lost to Saffa 20 points to 17. It was all going well for the Dragons. Kai Evans kicked us into a 12-0 lead, but then Saffa wrestled control of the game thanks to 3 tries and 20 unanswered points. Jared Rosser gave Dragons some hope in the final quarter, but we ended up having to settle for a losing bonus point, which means we now have to beat the Sharks at Rodney Parade on Sunday to guarantee qualification for the knockout stages. Gav, did you see anything of this game?
I've seen some clips that were put up on social media afterwards. I was playing rugby myself at the time, so I wasn't playing rugby. I was running the line, if I'm honest. But and then when I saw the result, I didn't feel desperate to go and hunt out lots of footage. But I know you paid to watch it, which you know you are black and amber blood, but
yeah. So. You know when I said I had absolutely no intention of paying EPCR any money to watch the Dragons. I did.
I knew, and I knew you would. The minute you said that, I was like, he's going to watch it.
Well, I did watch the pole game. I didn't pay for that, but
No.
On the weekend, there was no games of Rodney Parade. So Newport County wasn't at home. The Dragons obviously wasn't at home. So I had a spare Saturday and I thought, well, go on then. So I paid €7.99. I think it works out like £6.88, something like that. And I knew I was going to regret it straight away. As soon as I clicked payment on the website, I knew I was going to regret it. The first thing to say, and I didn't talk about this on Rap, the commentators were the most biased commentators I've ever heard. It was honestly like watching Zebra TV. Because all we kept hearing for the first 5 minutes was, oh, this is a must-win game for Zebra. This is a must-win. You know, they got to win you. And I'm thinking, well, no, it's a must-win for both teams, actually, you know, for slightly different reasons. And you know when Jiffy commentates for the Six Nations on BBC, and you know when people complain because he makes noises.
Yeah.
You know, when Wales speaks like, oh, come on. And there was a bit of that going on. And I thought, hang on now, mate. I've paid money to watch this game. You know, I don't want to hear two Zebra cheerleaders here.
Well,
you know, it was an Italian commentator, well, what sounded like an Italian commentator, and then there was an English commentator. Now I don't know if they had any connection to Zebra or whether they worked for the club or whatever, but my goodness, they really wanted Zebra to win this game. It was horrible bias.
Was it Mickey Morgan levels of bias? You know, the rugby league commentator,
yes,
the dirty get stuff. The best club in the world.
The English commentator needs to watch a video of Squid Rugby explaining why players kick. And I suggest he also goes to friend of the pod, Sam Lana, and watches video on X, because all he kept moaning about was players kicking. So we did kick an awful lot in this game, but that was because we was under pressure. We couldn't get out of 22. In the second half, Zebra did control the game very well. But anytime someone kicked, you went, oh, there's no rugby being played, they're kicking again. Oh, it's another kick. It's like, well, yes, because there's nothing else on, mate. I mean, I honestly don't know who these guys were. If anybody actually paid to watch this game and they knew who those commentators were, because I didn't mention it, I didn't hear any names being mentioned. Let me know, because honestly, they were absolutely awful. Really bad. But yeah, for me, it was very frustrating. Like I said, the first half, I thought Dragons were pretty good. And Dave Flanagan said after the game that we should have put it away in the first half. It was actually our attack that let us down in this game, Gav, because we've spoken so many times about our defence letting us down. But it was actually our attack. We was in Zebra's 22 quite a lot. We had no cutting edge. We weren't clinical enough.
But that has been a feature this season, hasn't it?
I know. The second half, mate, Zebra came out a completely different team. And there was one point during the second half, I think it was like 20, 25 minutes, we didn't have the ball. We could not get the ball off Zebra. They controlled that game really well in the second, but they wanted it more, which is really disappointing because we knew we had to win this game. We knew that a win would guarantee us qualification for the last 16. And this result now has made it even harder because we're probably likely that we have to beat the Sharks. A bonus point may be enough depending on other results. But we've made it hard for ourselves again, Gav, you know, and I don't know why. We've seen a number of times where we have a good first half, and then the second half we come out and we're lackluster. You know,
that's been a problem. That's been the problem this season. And Edinburgh's another example of that.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. But yeah, I knew, like I said, as soon as I pressed those payment details, I knew I was going to regret it. It wasn't a classic. And again, the English commentator was very keen to remind us that this has not been a good game. So, all right, mate, I don't need you keeping on you.
You surprised me, Jamie. It wasn't the classic.
Who would have thought a game against Zebra and Dragons wouldn't be a classic?
Who would have imagined that?
The thing is as well, Gav, and look, I've spoken a number of times about Zebra on this podcast and on the Wrap. They are a good team now. Well, they're improving. They're getting better. They've got good players.
And Benetton are a proper team. Benetton will get into the URC playoffs, I imagine.
But Zebra are making strides. However, if we're serious about the Dragons being a competitive team and making progress and kicking on, and again, I said this on the Wrap podcast, it's no disrespect to Zebra, but I'm sorry, Gav, these are the teams that we've got to be beating. We've got to be beating Zebra. You know, we've got to beat the teams around us in order to beat the teams above us, haven't we? And we haven't won in Parma now since 2019. And it's a little bit embarrassing now.
And I've made the same point about us. There are games we should be winning. That is one of them.
Absolutely, and that's no disrespect to Steve, but like I said,
No.
they are much improved. They deserve the win. I've got no issues. They controlled that game very well in the second half. But if we are serious, we spoke to David about it. If we want to win more games, be prepared to be taken seriously. I'm sorry, Steve, but games we should be winning. We've got to go into a job on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I disappoint myself, but we did come away with a losing bonus point. So we're still in the competition, but as usual, Dragons make it hard for themselves. So it's all on Sunday now. Okay, I think it's time for Gav's Gwent Rugby Roundup. So what's been happening in the community game there, Gav?
Well, a lot, and I have results from all the leagues, so this is going to be quite a long list, but I think it's important to know that Premiership, three of our teams playing on the weekend. Pontypool away to Carmarthen Quins, lost 35-28. Pontypool are now falling away from the top a bit. They're down to 5th. Ebervale made the long trip to RGC, which I always find hilarious because when I taught in Colwyn Bay, we used to do our sports day at what used to be Park Areas, is now a Stadium at Zip World. But Ebervale won 35-14. And Newport, who are also making big strides, beat Swansea 33-14 away. So Llandovery at top, Ebervale are second, but Llandovery got 2 games in hand over them. And Newport are 9 points behind Ebervale in third, but have 3 games in hand over Ebervale, 1 over Llandovery. So it's strong. Looking for the Gwent sides, and Pontypool are down in 5th. In Championship East, lots of rugby there. Beddau beat Cross Keys 41-30. Penaltha lost 25-26 at home to Bedwas. And Rumney Cardiff lost 34-38 to Newbridge. So Newbridge are 4th in the Championship East. Bedwas are 5th. Cross Keys are 7th, and Penaltha are in 11th in the relegation position. Going down into Division 1 East, Abergavenny's dreadful season continues. They lost 45-13 at home to NSD.
Gosh, up the D's. Sorry.
Well, they're doing very well. They're in 3rd currently. Bedlinog 20, Talawine 21. Brynmawr, who are unbeaten, beat one of my former clubs, Dowlais, 50 points to 3. Monmouth beat Pontypool United 24-19 at home. Monmouth have not had a good season, so that's a good win for them. And Risca lost 20-25 at home to Blaenavon. So Talawine are top there. Brynmawr are second, but have 2 games in hand. They're only a couple of points behind. And Annesty are 3rd. So in the Division 2 East, Caldecott beat Pill Harriers 26-20. Croeso-Ceiliog and Aptleri Blaen y Gwent drew 17 all. Cwmbran beat Caerleon 28-15, local derby there. Gondifife beat Blackwood 21-5, and in what must have been a horrific day for the guys' desk, they lost 97-8 away to Newport High School Old Boys. I've been on the end of those, and it is never pleasant.
No.
And Aptleri are top, Newport High School Old Boys are second, and Blackwood are 3rd in Division 2 East. In the Division 3 East, Abercarn beat Machen 59-17. Blaenau beat Chepstow 33-17. Nantyglow beat Fleur-de-Lis 32-14, local derby there. And Rumney beat RTB Ebervale 51-36. I can see RTBs from my mum's house, but sadly they did not win in that game. Abercarn are top in Division 3, Blaenau are 2nd. Into Division 4, Bedwellty beat Blackwood Stars 34-5. Betos lost 12-27 at home to New Panteg. Crickhowell beat Gwynafyd 25-20. Crickhowell, I didn't realise were Dragons region, but apparently they are.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah, I don't know. I never worked out what county they were in. I always thought they were in. They'd be Monmouthshire anyway. Welsh geography, not for now. Crumlin beat Newport Saracens 26-24. New Tredegar beat St Julian's High School All Boys 23-17. And Whitehead beat Havrodynes, but I forgot to write down their score there, apparently. New Panteg are top there, and Saracens are 2nd. And then into Division 5, Hollybush beat Westmorton 31-7. Pontefraith beat Abersychan 24-8. Pontefraith are top and unbeaten. And then heading into Division 6 East, Derry beat Trinant 57-3. And Mago beat Old Hilarians 41-7. Derry are top there in Division 6 East. So I've now decided I'm probably coming to the end of my rugby playing career. Some people would argue I never started.
I've heard that before, Gav.
Well, no, but I am. And I'm building up what I want to do, some like kind of rugby bucket list thing. So one of the things I want to do, I have never actually played an adult game of rugby for a Welsh team. I have played adult rugby in Wales, but for English teams. Yeah. And I've played youth rugby in Wales. So I've decided one of the things I want to do is play an adult game of rugby. So if any Division 6 East teams want a very non-mobile second row to play one game for them, please just hit me up via the podcast. And I will happily bring my boots to wherever part of Gwent there is.
We'll put a call out on the X channels, our social media channels, and get our dream realised for you, Gav.
Yeah, so I bizarrely never played adult rugby for a Welsh side. You know, I've played youth rugby, and I played. I took my club side now, the Ports, up to Beaufort, and we lost 27-6, I think, to a good Beaufort side at that point. You know, if my mate who was playing centre had just been a bit more careful with his offload, I'd have gone over to score under the post. But you know, we won't talk about that now. But yeah, that's my plan now, to play a game of adult rugby for a Welsh side.
Excellent. Is that it now then, Gav, for the
That is, roundup? Yeah, that was every game of rugby that was played in Gwent this weekend, I believe.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Before we go, let's talk about Wales's Six Nations squad. 6 Dragons have been named in the Wales squad. So we got Elliot D, Leon Brown, Anne Wainwright, Tane Basham, Rio Dyer, and Kai Evans. The squad contains 5 uncapped players. So you got the Bath tight head Archie Griffin, who I haven't seen a lot of. I think he's third choice, but he's been tracked by Wales for some time apparently, so he's a young talent. And then you've got the Cardiff quartet of Evan Lloyd, Alex Mann, Mackenzie Martin, and Cam Winnett. Darry Lake and Jack Morgan are injured, so Wales have a new captain, 21-year-old Dav Jenkins, who I'm a massive fan of. I think he's a generational talent, and I don't want to do that lazy cliche saying like he's the next Alun Wyn Jones, but I generally think he's gonna be in that mold.
Different player to Alun Wyn Jones, more like Will Rowlands, just big and horrible.
In terms of like leadership and influence, I'm thinking, you know, he's definitely going to be.
He's a friend of mine who's an Exeter fan. I said he's captain Exeter and looks like, you know, looks the real deal down there.
Oh, he does. Yeah, I've watched Exeter a few times, and he's leading that team incredibly well. Very mature, beyond his years. He's just doing a really good job down there. So the average age of the squad is 25. So this is a young squad. It's raw. It's inexperienced in some areas, but the time to rebuild was now. And Gav, I know you've had some time now to digest the squad. What do you think of it? What stands out for you in this squad?
Right, I think I've gone all over the place with it. I've not been elated, but I've been like, no, that's all right. Through to this is the worst thing ever. I'm going to start watching badminton, but but let's be realistic. It's the start of a World Cup cycle, and you know, Talupe is injured, but is he going to go through to another World Cup? No. Is Thomas Francis going to go through to another World Cup? No. So and we are bearing tight head. You know, the tight head selection is raw and bare. But now was the time to start blooding them. Now was the time to start blooding those players. And, you know, Cardiff, you know, we've got good youngsters as well, but those Cardiff youngsters have been doing well in probably the best Welsh side in the URC. So it's good to see all those Cardiff boys in there.
Ospreys are the best team, best Welsh side, I'd say.
I don't like saying that because I have this disagreement with Josh off Blood and Mud quite a lot. That Cardiff are the best side, so I'm not going to shift from that. But you're probably right. But you know, I don't want to say it out loud. Back three does worry me, but I have now started the Kai Evans hype train. Woo woo. And,
so now you're on the hype train. I've been driving that train since we started this pod, and now you want to come on board. Oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
you're welcome. By the way, anyone's welcome. Anyone is welcome.
Well, Paul Williams today joined us on the hype train. We are moving forward.
The one thing I will say on Kai Evans, though, so in the first half against Zebra, he absolutely nailed his kicks. There was one from near the halfway line. In the second half, it wasn't quite a Sam Costello moment, but he did miss a very easy penalty in front of the post. And he missed a conversion from Jared Ross's try, which was tricky given the angle. But he did miss. Those points was proved costly. That's the only thing I will say. But I do love him.
The Welsh back three now does worry me a bit because we've gone a couple of weeks ago having Emmanuel Feyer-Waboso and Louis Rees-Zammit, and Emmanuel, despite sounding more Cardiff than most of the people from Cardiff, has now decided he's English, whatever. And Louis Rees-Zammit is off to be an American footballer. So now we've got back three options: Josh Adams, Rio Dyer, Tom Rogers.
I'm sorry, Tom Rogers. Nobody will ever convince me Tom Rogers is an international player. I'm just not sold on.
I'm barely convinced he's a player. He is taking over from Johnny McNichol as the Scarlet player. I'm like, why is he in the squad? Why is he there? Because I have no Tom Rogers and then Kai Evans and Mason Grady. So they're our back five options. On Johan Lloyd, who's another player I'm not convinced by.
Tom Rogers is a good player for the Scarlets. I think URC level is good. But when I've seen him for Wales, the problem I have, when I see him for Wales, he always looks like a rabbit in headlights. And his last performance in the Wales shirt against South Africa, you remember that what happened that day when we got absolutely pumped. He just looked all over the place defensively. So no one's going to convince me Tom Rogers is an international player. I am joking when I say this, but I'd rather see Jared Rosser in there, to be honest. I think he'd do a better job,
But I think, and I was engaging with a Cardiff fan on Twitter today, which, wasn't great, but I think what he suggested to me is the likely back three: Josh Adams at 15, Rio and Mason Grady on the wings, and I could see that.
That's a good shot.
Being the likely starting 15. I'm not sure Josh Adams is a fullback, but
we got no choice now. Well, you can play Cam Winnett there, who I've been very impressed with at Cardiff.
He's injured, isn't he?
But he is expected to come back at some stage during the Six Nations. That's why they've called him up. What I like about Cam Winnett, right? He's always cool, calm and composed. He never looks flustered.
No.
He very rarely makes mistakes. And for a player of his age, I've been really, really impressed with him. And I'm glad he's been called up. And I did say he would be my breakthrough player in the Six Nations if he's given opportunities.
And I think, Rio's good under a high ball, Josh Adams is good under a high ball, and Mason Grady's solid enough. So you could play those, and that'd be, a decent back three. Mason Grady's positioning defensively worries me. He can tackle, but he's often not in the right place. And then the centres are fine. Tompkins and North, that's the obvious choice there. 10, again, we are not just scraping the barrel. The barrel is right through to the ground, isn't it? So who are our 10 options? Kai Evans, Johan Lloyd, or Costello?
Sam Costello, yeah.
Yeah, Costello's probably the best there. God, he says deeply in taking breath. 9, we're all right. There's options there. Back row.
Why does Hardy keep getting called up to the Wales squad?
Well, I quite like Hardy as a 9. He's very much a Gatland player, isn't he? He recycles the ball, but he's basic. It's just boom into 10, recycle into 10, recycle. He can kick as well. He's a decent box kicker. So I think that's why he gets in, because he does the basics consistently. He's not flashy.
But I feel sorry for Rodri Williams, because I think he could offer this Wales team quite a lot, and he should have had more caps than what he
Oh,
has. Like,
yeah.
Kieran Hardy, no matter how, he can have a very average season, yet he still always gets called up to a Wales squad.
Scotland likes
I
him.
don't dislike Hardy, but I just find sometimes he hasn't earned his call-ups,
But, like, you're not looking beyond Davis or Thomas, really, anyway, are you?
No,
And
I
then,
suppose not.
second row, that's quite competitive. Will Rowlands there, Beard, Dav Jenkins. So one of Beard and Rowlands doesn't start. That's a bit strange. And then the young lad at Cardiff, Teddy Williams, as well.
Big talent.
Yeah.
Very big talent. Big bloke as well. He's massive.
Yeah. How old is he? It's 20 and, he is a big old lump. But the one place where I am panicking is tight end.
23. Teddy Williams.
Oh, right.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Tight end is the one place, you'd say Azarati's probably the starter.
Yeah. So when I saw this squad, I thought, okay, this is raw and inexperienced, but I do believe this is the right time now to rebuild. And I think all of us, and I don't just mean like, the rugby supporters who follow the region, so they're, connected more to rugby. Everyone, including casual fans, hardcore rugby fans, we all need to accept that we're going to probably take a bit of pain in the coming years. We have to be patient. We're not going to be challenging for Six Nations titles anytime soon. This is about development. There are certain areas in this squad that do concern me. You've touched on already. Tight head for me, the front row in particular, I am concerned about. I'm not sure if we're going to get a platform against the likes of France, Ireland, and England with a front row like that. And you look at the tight head situation. Thomas Francis, who's always reliable scrum time. And yeah, I get the argument. He doesn't do a lot in the loose. They want a more mobile pack, etc. But ideally, you still need to do the job of scrummaging.
I would disagree with the fact he doesn't do a lot in the loose. He's at every every rack, and he just slows it down. That's what he does. He's a disruptor, and I think he's Sam Larner's done a lot of work on Tom Francis's work, and why it's lazy to say all he does is scrummage.
Yeah, that's the perception, though, isn't it? Yeah, I do agree with you. But the perception is he's not mobile enough, and he doesn't do a lot in the loose, but he offers reassurance of scrum time.
Yeah, Reece Carey is mobile and can't scrummage,
exactly. It is a concern for me. Like I said, Evan Lloyd, he's a kid, he's untested, he's third choice at Bath. Leon, look, we know Leon is a work in progress in terms of his scrummaging, but he is very mobile and explosive in the loose. But Kieran Azarati is probably going to be first choice. And again, I've nothing against Azarati. He's been good for Cardiff, but he's still learning his craft.
Yeah, he's fine.
I think there's going to be a few harsh lessons at scrum time, especially on the loose as well. Cormac Dowachowski, again, good for Cardiff, learning his craft. Kempson Mathias for the Scarlets. Gareth Thomas, I would expect to be the starter.
Yeah, I'd say Thomas Elias Azarati is probably a starting front row.
When you look at the hookers, so Elliot D, Ryan Elias, and Evan Lloyd from Cardiff, I saw a few Cardiff fans saying, Belcher should have been there. Well, I like Belcher. I think he's a very good club player, but I don't see him as a national standard.
Well, he's not better than Knowles, is he? Yeah.
No, it's a bit of Cardiff bias going on there. What do you think of Bradley Roberts missing out? Do you think he's harsh to miss out? No, he didn't have a very good game against Cardiff, did he? But over the course of the season, he has been pretty good. Do you think
he has? But I don't think
been overlooked?
I don't think Gatland's ever liked him. Elliott's a better player than Bradley Roberts for me every day. So he should get in there. Ryan Elias is a good hooker, and then you could have put one of any but 7 or 8 who could have gone, and that could have been Bradley Roberts over Evan Lloyd or whoever, but none of them particularly.
That's what I mean. Would you swap Evan Lloyd for Bradley Roberts in your favour? I suppose Gatland is looking to the future, isn't he? I know Bradley Roberts is now old, but he's looking to the future.
I don't think he sees Bradley Roberts in his squad, so therefore he isn't going to put him in it. It's
his size, isn't it, that goes against him?
I think so. And Elliott's not big, but Elliott holds his own scrummaging, whereas Bradley Roberts doesn't bring a lot to the scrummaging. And second row, you're probably looking at Rowlands and Dav Jenkins starting there.
Yeah.
You know, back row. What do you think of the back row?
Well, this is it. See, I've seen people. By the way, I think Tane Basham is fortunate to be in this Wales squad.
God,
and
so
I will
do I.
say that as a Dragons fan. As much as I like Tane, like I say, I don't think he's had a very good season. I think he's there because of the injuries that Wales have in the back. I think he's fortunate. And I've seen people suggesting that he could play a 6, for Tommy Raffel a 7, and Alan Wainwright at 8. I don't see Tane as a 6, because I think if you're going to play 6, you need to be a really good jackler.
Yeah.
And that's not an area of strength of Tane's. He's not a jackling back row. He's very good in the loose. He's explosive, good ball carrier, got good feet, got good pace. I don't see him as that jackling 6 in the mould of Lydia. So I would prefer to see James Botham there, and I'm actually pleased with Botham because I rate Botham quite highly. So I'm glad he's back in the international setup. If I'm taking my Dragons hat off now for a moment, I'm going to be completely neutral as a Wales support. I am pleased to see Botham there.
Botham's a proper 6 for me. Now, I think with Tommy Raffel, you've got someone who'll do the breakdown stuff, but I like a 6 who's just going to do all the horrible stuff.
But that's not Tane, is it?
No.
As much as I like Tane, that is not his strength. He doesn't do the dog stuff.
Tane's an athlete, but you want you want a Moriarty. You want you just somebody who's just going to do the horrible, dirty stuff. And both of them does do that. The other young Cardiff lad, oh God, it's fallen out of my brain now. Back rower,
Alex Mann.
Man, yeah, he plays 6 as well, doesn't he? And he's
been great. He's been really. His stats are through the roof in the URC.
He's another one who'll do all the dog work. So it might be interesting to see him at 6 as well. Raffel 7, Wainwright 8, then Perm someone at 6. Unless, and please don't do this, Warren, unless he puts Dav Jenkins at 6.
Oh no, I hate that. We don't like it, Gav, do we? We don't like locks going in the back row. We've had this discussion. Oh gosh, we're old-fashioned like that, but I do agree with you. Yeah. The other area of concern for me is fly half. Now, I like Sam Costello, but there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders, Gav, isn't there? Because we all know about the Welsh 10, how much scrutiny and pressure there is for anybody in that 10 jersey for Wales. You get a lot of pressure, a lot of attention, a lot of scrutiny. This is going to be a big step up for Costa. I think we're going to learn an awful lot about him. And then you look at the other options, Johan Lloyd, who I think has gone really well for the Scarlets.
He's a fullback. So.
But, I was just about to say, took the words out of my mouth, he's better at fullback than at 10, in my opinion, and in yours as well. You see him more as a fullback. And then you've got Kai Evans, who is down as a 10, but again, in my eyes, and yours, and a lot of people, he's a fullback. So we've got one out-and-out 10, and the other 2 are fullbacks playing at 10.
Yeah, I imagine at some point we'll see Callum Sheedy back in the squad.
I mean, he's not exactly tearing up trees with Bristol, mind, is he?
No. But, Welsh 10s. There's a lad at Ospreys. God, I've forgotten everyone's name, but he's not ready yet.
Oh, Dan Edwards.
Dan Edwards. Yeah. He's decent. And
I did think, again, you take the words out of my mouth all bloody night this evening. Gary did it again. I thought that Will Reid may have got a call-up because Gatland has actually name-checked him.
Yeah, yes.
He said in a press conference about Will Reid, so I did think maybe he would be in the squad, but he's not. Just as well, really, because if we lost Kai Evans and Will Reid, and Angus O'Brien isn't fit yet, we're going to be in real trouble. They were going to end up playing bloody Jordan Williams at 10.
Or Owen.
Which actually wouldn't be a bad shout. That would be the best option. We've had this conversation before anyway. But so this is a Wales team that's young, it's raw, it's an experience, but we have to look to the future now, and we all need to, show some patience with this squad. Do you think it's a wooden spoon squad, though, Gav? Because I've seen people saying, we're going to finish last, we're not going to be competitive. I don't buy that at all.
We'll finish 5th, but we'll beat Italy and we'll beat Scotland. I was going to go to the Scotland game, and now for various reasons linked to my conservatory roof leaking and various other things.
Oh, no.
I'm now not going to the Scotland game. And I was going to be sitting next to Johnny McGinty from Scottish Rugby pod.
Oh, that's a shame.
But I've said to Johnny, I'm going to FaceTime him the minute that game finishes because I'm convinced we are going to win against
I think
Scotland.
we can win at least 2 games.
We'll beat Scotland, we'll beat Italy. I think we could beat England as well.
We could beat Scotland because they've been shit in the bed in Cardiff for years.
Yeah.
And I think that's a winnable game. Italy, again, I know they've improved, a lot of young talent. I think that's a winnable game. England at Twickenham, that's going to be difficult, but not impossible. We're not going to beat France or Ireland. That's out of the question. But I think we can win at least 2 games. So, yeah, I agree with you, Gav. I don't think we'll finish with this. There's a lot of negativity surrounding this squad, though, isn't there? A lot of doom-mongering. And, you know, I must admit, when I first saw the squad, I was like, oh, boy, you know.
That was my
This is going to be a very difficult campaign. But now I've had time to digest it. I think this is the way to go.
No, I've been chatting with Sam Larner, and he's convinced me it's a good squad. So he's a much wiser man than me.
How many times over the years have you seen people, and I've done it myself, Gatland calls up the senior players he always calls up. You go, oh, Gatland's picking the same old players. Why didn't he pick someone younger? Why didn't he give others a chance? He's doing that now. So, you know, people can't moan about Gatland's picking the same old players. And then when he does pick, you know, the young, exciting talent, and there is a lot of that in this squad. You know, Mackenzie Martin is raw, but he's exciting. Alex Mann, Cam Winnett, as I already mentioned. There is exciting talent. You can't moan that we're picking the kids. No. You know, you can't have it both ways. We got to rebuild. The time is now. We shied away from it for far too long. We should have done this under Pivac. But Pivac was dicking about, chopping and changing all the time. He couldn't get any continuity.
And kept I think this is the way to go. Johnny McNichol. But if
people got a huge problem with him, haven't you?
I do. Oh God, he kept he kept Jonah Holmes out of the squad. It just drives me insane.
Of course, anyway, that's why. Yeah.
Anyway, as the official owner of the Jonah Holmes hype train, you know, it's.
I miss Jonah Holmes. I really like Jonah Holmes, and the way he was treated by Pivac and Wales. And we never got to the bottom of that, did he? As to why he was dropped, it was very sudden, wasn't it?
But yeah, and if people really want to see what a crap Welsh team is, like, slam the 80s start on BBC Wales tonight. And as
it was last night.
Was it last night? Oh,
it's on iPlayer now.
Yeah. But as somebody who grew up watching that Welsh team in the 80s, that's the problem. Particularly when you get the episode when Brian Waldron is coach, the Neath coach, and selects 9 of the Neath team. Oh, God.
Yeah. But I grew up watching Wales in the 90s. And believe me, that was grim.
Oh, yeah.
That was grim watching Wales in the 90s. So
I lived in London in most of the 90s watching Wales. It was not great.
Yeah. Hopefully these upcoming campaigns won't be anywhere near as painful as the 80s and 90s. But they could be, because we know there's a lot of issues in Welsh rugby right now. And it has, you know, it will affect the national team. But we just need to be patient, don't we, Gav? I think Welsh supporters... You know, I know there's a lot of expectation with the rugby mad Welsh, public, as I call them, rugby mad Welsh public, that, you know, they expect us to win Grand Slams, championships. Those days are now coming to an end.
Yeah.
It's about being competitive now, building for the future.
For a while. And then the cycle will come around again.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We've gone through quite a lot tonight, haven't we? Shall we leave it there?
I believe so.
Excellent. Okay.
I need to walk my dog.
Oh, there we are then. That's good time then. Will we be back next week? Because there's no game to preview. I don't know if we're going to be back next week or not. We'll make that decision.
Yeah.
Later in the week. So we may or may not be back next week. But thank you very much for joining me, Gav, as always.
No problem.
And thanks again to Angus, great guest. And thank you for listening. We may or may not be back next week. But until next time, take care, everybody, and goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Dragon's Lair podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe, rate and review wherever you listen to us, as it really helps spread the word. You can find us on all the usual social media channels or email us on welshregionalrugbypod@gmail.com. And remember, whatever the question is, rugby is always the answer.
Social Podcast Network.